You know that friend, the one who borrowed some cash from you years ago and suddenly started flashing it around like they just won the lottery? And lately, they're not just not paying you back, they're hitting up all your other friends for even more loans? You'd probably start giving them the side eye, right? Well, lately, Uncle Sam's credit situation is getting that same kind of skeptical glare. Whispers of the US dollar collapsing are back, partly because of all the talk about extending those massive tax cuts. The market's looking at Washington's ability to manage the nation's credit card bill and thinking, maybe not so great. Recent Treasury bond sales haven't exactly set the world on fire. Buyer enthusiasm dipped a bit, and they're asking for a slightly higher return. Think of it as slightly fewer people showing up for the pre-sale, and the ones who do show up want a better discount. But hold your horses. There's still way more money wanting to buy these bonds than the US is selling. A huge chunk is still coming from overseas, and big long-term players like pension funds and central banks are still scooping them up like free samples. So the whole nobody's buying US debt, the dollar's toast thing, yeah, that's mostly just folks yelling fire in a crowded theater. Why the slight hesitation from some short-term investors? It's mostly political drama. One side wants to extend the multi-trillion-dollar tax cuts. The other side is yelling, "Are you kidding me? The deficit is already bigger than a whale wearing a top hat." It's kind of comical. They spent ages trying to trim a few billion here and there from agency budgets, only to turn around and propose slashing trillions in tax revenue. It's like saving pennies while setting fire to $100 bills. The tax cut proponents argue it stimulates long-term growth, eventually boosting revenue, but the back and forth has rattled the financial markets. As hedge fund titan Ray Dalio put it bluntly, the US is like a ship sailing towards the rocks, and the folks at the helm are arguing about whether to turn left or right. He added, "I don't care which way they turn, I just care that they turn." Here's the cold, hard truth. Regardless of the political theatrics, neither side has a real plan or even the motivation to actually shrink the national debt pile. At best, they might slow down how fast it grows or try to make borrowing a little cheaper. Why? Because debt and currency are two sides of the same coin. Trying to shrink debt too fast can cause a brutal economic contraction, worse than the debt itself. For decades, the US debt has only gone one way, up. So the million-dollar question, or perhaps the trillion-dollar question, is why does the world keep lending money to a government that seems perfectly happy just rolling over debt and has no intention of ever truly paying it off? Is it American exceptionalism, coercion, or something deeper? Let's rewind to 1944 and the Bretton Woods system. People often think it just made the dollar the world's currency, end of story. But it was bigger than that. It fundamentally reshaped the global economic game. Before the Industrial Revolution, humanity's big problem was simple: couldn't make enough stuff. Population grew, but farming technology didn't keep up. Result: famine, war, and the dreaded Malthusian trap. Basically, too many people fighting over too little food. In China, they called it the 300-year dynastic cycle. In the West, Malthus. Same grim outcome: population crashes to restore balance. Then came the Industrial Revolution, flipping everything upside down. Suddenly, we could make way more stuff than anyone could possibly afford. The problem wasn't supply, it was demand, or lack of purchasing power. Capitalists paid workers only a fraction of the value they created, leading to repeated economic crises rooted in people just not having enough money to buy all the cool new things being churned out. Europe, industrializing first, got the initial taste of this demand problem. Recurrent crises, deflation, it was a mess. They tried selling more goods abroad, but everyone else was trying the same thing and slapped on tariffs. So they turned to Plan B, colonization. But this wasn't just grabbing land like ancient empires. Under the shadow of demand deficiency, they needed customers. They wanted people with money to buy their products. That's why, during China's Taiping Rebellion, foreign powers actually helped the Qing government. The rebels were bad for business. The gentry class had purchasing power, and chaos would destroy it. It sounds funny, but yes, the Brits were basically fighting for the right to sell stuff. But even seizing chunks of the world wasn't enough to soak up all that industrial output. Nations kept squabbling over markets and resources, leading to 2 world wars that killed tens of millions. Everyone was thoroughly sick of fighting over customers. The world desperately needed a different solution to the demand problem. Enter Franklin D. Roosevelt. His radical idea: what if, instead of just trying to sell stuff, we exported purchasing power? Sounds nuts, right? Just give people money? But he'd seen it work domestically with the New Deal, stimulating the US economy by putting money in people's hands through public works and even devaluing the dollar against gold, which was like a stealth wealth redistribution. The challenge was doing this globally with different currencies. FDR had plans, but he died shortly after Bretton Woods was signed, taking many details with him. The global dollar system initially faltered. The missing piece? The Marshall Plan. Post-war Europe was rubble, broke, and couldn't buy anything. The US initially planned to sell them reconstruction materials, but realized they couldn't pay. So, the brilliant pivot: give Europe billions, mostly as grants. This gave them dollars, purchasing power, to buy what they needed, overwhelmingly from the US, the only intact industrial power. This solidified the dollar as the global currency. But soon, Europe recovered, global production surged, and the demand problem returned. The US faced a choice: more wars, they did engage in regional conflicts, or keep exporting dollars. They landed on an ingenious trick. Instead of selling to the world for dollars, the US would increasingly buy from the world with dollars. Through trade deficits, excess dollars stayed abroad, circulating and providing that much-needed global purchasing power. This is the foundation of the current system. The US prints dollars, buys goods worldwide, enjoys cheap imports, and relies less on its own manufacturing. It's like having an unlimited credit card at the global mall. The price for this lifestyle? Hollowing out domestic manufacturing and the ever-growing national debt. The US essentially tackles the global demand problem by reducing its own supply. Other countries are happy to sell stuff, earn dollars, and then often lend those dollars back to the US by buying treasury bonds, earning interest. It's a neat loop. The world makes stuff, sells it for dollars, and lends the dollars back, funding the US debt habit while ensuring the system keeps spinning. This recycles dollars back to the US, keeping borrowing costs low and the dollar strong. The massive debt seen today is an evolution of this system. Bretton Woods originally tied the dollar to gold, a physical limit on how many dollars could be created and exported. As production grew, gold became a bottleneck. The system iterated by dropping gold entirely, moving to pure fiat debt currency. This allows unlimited money creation, necessary to keep pace with potential demand in a highly productive global economy. If the US stopped exporting enough dollars, global demand would tank, factories would close, and the US, the biggest beneficiary of globalization, would face a severe reckoning. So, the US has to issue debt, and other countries have to buy it. It's a codependent relationship. While US debt growth erodes its creditworthiness, a dollar collapse would cause a global financial tsunami that's infinitely worse. They're stuck together. The world complains about US debt, but keeps buying because the alternative is unthinkable. Most major economies have their own debt and money printing problems anyway. Nobody's hands are clean. It's a global, uneasy truce. Everyone tolerates the debt expansion because it props up the current, albeit flawed, economic stability. It's short-term comfort over long-term fixes. Think of the dollar like the English language in computer programming. It's not necessarily the best possible system, but it was there first, got embedded deep into the code of the global economy, and now the cost of changing it is astronomical. Global assets, including many people's retirement funds, are tied to this system. If US debt collapsed, it wouldn't just be America's problem, the whole financial system could implode. That's why capital markets hate trade wars. They disrupt the global dollar flow. Look, the dollar system has massive problems: mountains of debt, political chaos, lost industries, bubbles everywhere. Yes, there are 100 reasons to be bearish on the dollar's long-term health. One country's credit just can't keep underwriting global purchasing power growth forever. It's an unsolvable core issue. Plus, the system built to fix a demand problem became a financial weapon the US can wield. But the world is messy. Sometimes the least bad option is the only one you have. Money is just a medium of credit to make trading easier. The dollar became the widely accepted one because no one else could step up. As Dalio says, when everyone's trapped in the same system, the worst possible equilibrium might be the only stable one. So yeah, Uncle Sam's debt is a mess, but for now, the world is still loaning him money, because honestly, the alternatives look even scarier.